Click. That's the sound of a padlock snapping shut on my own gate. The crunch of gravel under boots as some hired security walks away, leaving me trapped on my own property like a prisoner. The whiff of diesel exhaust hangs in the mountain air from trucks that suddenly can't get home. Picture this. You're a stubborn 58-year-old widower who's fought for this land his whole life, minding your own business on property your grandfather left you. Then Victoria, with her clipboard and smug grin, brands your cabin unfit and literally locks you inside your own community. Big mistake. See, what Victoria and her cronies didn't bother to research was that weathered concrete bridge everyone uses to get in and out, the sole lifeline connecting 47 fancy homes to the outside world. Yeah, I own that, every square inch. What would you do if neighbors locked you on your own land? Ever been trapped by your own HOA? Share your revenge story below. My name is Ezra Blackwood, and 6 months ago I thought the worst thing that could happen to me already had. My wife Margaret died after 40 years of marriage, leaving me with a hole in my chest the size of Colorado. So I did what any broken man would do. I ran. Packed up our Denver suburban life and moved to my grandfather's old cabin in Pine Ridge Estates, up in the mountains where the scent of pine and frost still clings to my grandfather's old land. 47 fancy homes dot the mountainside, all linked to the world by one concrete bridge. My concrete bridge, though I didn't know that yet. Most residents are weekend warriors or retirees playing mountain man with designer flannel. A few of us live here year-round, minding our own business. We had an informal HOA that handled snow plowing. Keyword, had. Enter Victoria Thornfield, 52, recently relocated from Denver with her smug lawyer husband Marcus and entitled son Bradley, who eyed my land like a prize. Victoria brought one unshakable belief. She was born to rule over lesser mortals. Rumor was she wanted my land for a developer's pet project, luxury condos with mountain views. Within 6 months, Victoria had engineered herself into HOA president. Her platform? Elevating community standards. Translation, clearing out anyone who didn't fit her suburban fantasies. The click of her designer heels on my wooden porch announced her first visit. Cream-colored pantsuit, leather portfolio, Bradley smirking behind her like this was all some game. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, skipping pleasantries, "I'm here about your property compliance issues." I looked around my grandfather's 40 acres, hand-built log cabin, workshop where 3 generations had fixed everything from tractors to heartbreak, gardens that had fed our family since the 1940s. "What issues?" She flipped open that portfolio like a prosecutor. "Your cabin needs fresh paint. The workshop is an eyesore. Those gardens are inappropriate for a community of this caliber. Frankly, the entire aesthetic is dragging down property values." Now, I'm not a man who loses his temper easily. Margaret always said I had the patience of a saint and the stubborn streak of a mule. But listening to this woman insult 3 generations of my family's work, the creak of my grandfather's old rocking chair seemed to whisper warnings in the mountain wind. "This cabin has been in my family for 80 years, I said quietly. "My grandfather built it with his own hands. My father raised me here." "You want me to change it because it doesn't match your suburban fantasies?" Victoria's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Mr. Blackwood, we all have sentimental attachments, but progress requires sacrifice. I'm sure you understand." "I understand perfectly. The answer is no." She closed the portfolio with a snap. Bradley chuckled behind her. "We'll see about that." 2 weeks later, an official envelope appeared in my mailbox. Some anonymous citizen had filed complaints with Jefferson County about unpermitted structures on my property. The county inspector, a nervous kid who kept apologizing, explained that every building needed current permits and architectural surveys. The bitter taste of morning coffee turned to ash as I calculated $3,200 in fees for permits on buildings that had stood longer than most Pine Ridge residents had been alive. Victoria's first shot across the bow. But here's what she didn't know about the Blackwood family. We don't roll over for bullies. My grandfather fought claim jumpers in these mountains. My father stood up to corrupt county officials who tried to steal our water rights. That night, sitting in the workshop surrounded by 80 years of family history, I realized Victoria Thornfield had just picked a fight with the wrong man. Her words cut deeper than the mountain wind, but I wasn't about to let her win. She thought she was dealing with some grieving old fool who'd pack up and disappear. She had no idea who she was messing with. Ever had a neighbor try to control your life? Wait till you hear what I did next. Victoria didn't waste time savoring her permit victory. 3 days after I wrote that $200 check, she struck again. This time, she brought a surveyor, her brother-in-law naturally, to re-establish proper property boundaries. I was drinking my morning coffee when I heard the whir of surveying equipment cutting through the mountain silence. Through my kitchen window, I watched Victoria's brother-in-law, smirking like her, set up his shoddy transit on what I knew damn well was my land. "Morning," I called out, walking over with my coffee still steaming in the cold air. "Mind telling me what you're doing on my property?" Victoria's brother-in-law had the surveying skills of a drunk GPS and twice the arrogance. "We're resurveying community green space," he said, not bothering to look up. "Seems there's been some confusion about boundaries." "No confusion here. My property line runs 20 feet past that oak tree. Been that way since 1943, long before this community existed." He finally looked at me, that family smirk widening like he was enjoying some private joke. "Well, according to our instruments, you've been encroaching on community property for years. Amazing what proper equipment reveals." The younger assistant looked nervous, constantly checking his notes and glancing between his boss and me. Smart kid. He could smell the bullshit even if he wasn't brave enough to call it out. Within hours, Victoria's brother-in-law had discovered that my property line was mysteriously 20 feet smaller than it had been for 80 years. By the next afternoon, a crew was installing an 8-foot privacy fence, not on the disputed line, but 15 feet onto my land. The thunk of fence posts being driven into frozen ground echoed like gunshots across the mountain. Each post felt like a stab at Margaret's memory, but I wasn't about to let Victoria win this psychological warfare. The fence blocked my family's hiking trail access and positioned itself perfectly to kill my workshop's morning sunlight, destroying 80 years of Blackwood routines with surgical precision. Mrs. Holloway appeared at my elbow around 3 o'clock, carrying a thermos of hot coffee and wearing the worried expression of someone who'd seen enough small-town politics to know how these things end. "This isn't right, Ezra," she whispered, squeezing my arm with surprising strength. "That fence is clearly on your land. We're with you, honey." Then she glanced nervously toward Victoria's house, where curtains twitched in an upstairs window, and hurried away like she was afraid of being seen consorting with the enemy. That evening I called Becker and Associates, the county's most respected surveying firm. Tom Becker himself had surveyed half the properties in Jefferson County, including several that had gone to court. Cost me $800, money I didn't really have, but by Friday morning I had ironclad proof. Victoria's fence sat 15 feet inside my property line. But here's where my 40 years of engineering kicked in. When you've spent your career building bridges, dams, and roads, you learn that the devil lives in old documentation everyone forgets about. Infrastructure has memory, and that memory lives in county courthouses and dusty file cabinets. Saturday morning, I spent hours going through my grandfather's file boxes in the workshop, documents I hadn't touched since moving here. The crackle of old paper documents revealed genuine treasure. Grandpa's original 1943 mining claim, complete with something called an exclusive easement for bridge and road maintenance, the only way in or out of Pine Ridge. Monday morning at the courthouse confirmed what those yellow documents suggested. Every legal filing since 1978 referred to the current concrete bridge as sitting on an existing private easement granted by E. Blackwood Estate. The bridge everyone took for granted, the one connecting all 47 fancy homes to civilization, that would be me. I owned the bridge. Victoria, meanwhile, wasn't sitting idle. She called an emergency HOA meeting for Tuesday night, claiming I was in flagrant violation of community standards and demanding a $500 monthly fine for my ongoing illegal encroachment. The buzz of fluorescent lights in the community center made everyone look corpse pale as Victoria clicked through slides on her laptop like a corporate executioner presenting quarterly layoffs. Most residents sat silent, half terrified of becoming her next target, half simply absent to avoid taking sides. "Mr. Blackwood has been trespassing on community green space for years," she announced with the authority of someone who'd never been challenged. "His illegal encroachment must be corrected immediately, with monthly penalties until compliance." My hands shook slightly as I stood, not from fear, but from the effort of controlling my temper, but my voice stayed rock steady. "Victoria, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The survey is crystal clear, Mr. Blackwood." "Oh, it's clear all right." I walked to the front of the room, pulling out my independent survey and spreading it on the table. "This survey, conducted by Becker and Associates, people who actually know how to use surveying equipment, shows your fence is 15 feet onto my property. Victoria's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. That's impossible. What's impossible is how your brother-in-law got his surveying license. Cracker Jack box? Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Old Mr. Jenkins coughed, muttering just loud enough for everyone to hear. She's finally gone too far. Victoria slammed her laptop shut so hard I thought she'd crack the screen. The community has voted 7-2. You have 30 days to comply or face escalating daily fines. I nodded calmly and headed for the door, then turned back with the kind of smile that had made opposing contractors nervous for 4 decades. Victoria, you might want to check who actually owns that bridge you drove over to get here tonight. Spoiler alert, it's not the HOA. The look of confusion and dawning horror on her face was worth every penny of those permit fees. Ever had a neighbor try to steal your land? Wait till you see what I do with that bridge. Victoria's response to my bridge hint was swift and petty, like watching a toddler throw a tantrum with a law degree. By Thursday morning, 3 different harassment campaigns were already in motion. First came the mailbox war. A certified letter informed me that my hand-carved wooden mailbox, the one I'd made from oak off my own land, didn't meet community aesthetic standards. I needed to replace it with an approved model from Mountain Vista Landscaping within 10 days. I called Mountain Vista out of curiosity. The owner? Bradley Thornfield, Victoria's charming son, who'd apparently graduated from college dropout to mailbox mogul. Price for their standard community mailbox? $340 for what looked like a $40 plastic box from Home Depot with fancy lettering. Victoria had turned nepotism into an art form. Too bad she'd picked the wrong artist to scam. The smell of wood stain filled my workshop as I spent the weekend building a mailbox that would make the Smithsonian jealous. Hand-carved mountain scenes, weather-sealed cedar, bronze hardware, the works. It exceeded every requirement in their guidelines and cost me $30 in materials. Victoria's reaction: wood wasn't professional enough for Pine Ridge's image. Apparently craftsmanship was now a violation. Next came the garbage games. Suddenly Pine Ridge Waste Management was skipping my pickup due to route efficiency optimization. Funny how my garbage can was the only one being optimized right off their route. The crunch of gravel under my boots became my Tuesday morning soundtrack as I hauled trash to the community dumpster, which Victoria had conveniently relocated to Siberia. The garbage truck driver, a guy named Pete, pulled me aside one morning. "This is bullshit, Mr. Blackwood," he whispered, glancing around. "Lady called my boss, made threats about our contract. I'm sorry, man." Then came the firewood harassment. An anonymous complaint claimed my excessive firewood storage created a fire hazard. Fire Marshal Rodriguez, a decent guy caught in Victoria's web, had to inspect my neatly stacked cords. "This is the cleanest woodpile in the county," he said, shaking his head. "Someone's using my department as their personal revenge service." But here's where Victoria overplayed her hand. She started spreading rumors at Murphy's Diner about how my non-conforming cabin was destroying property values. Loud enough for Sarah Chen, a property rights attorney grabbing lunch, to overhear every word. Sarah called that afternoon. "Mr. Blackwood, I couldn't help noticing some concerning harassment patterns. Want to discuss your legal options over coffee?" While Victoria played mailbox dictator, I was building a case. Every interaction got documented with military precision. Every phone call recorded. Colorado's a one-party consent state, and brother, was I consenting. I requested 5 years of HOA meeting minutes, discovering Victoria's greatest hits album. The Kowalskis, harassed about landscaping until they fled. Mrs. Patterson, health violations about her cat until she moved to assisted living. The Garcias, months of torture about their vegetable garden until they sold at a loss. Victoria wasn't just a bully, she was a serial property predator. But the real bombshell came when Sarah started digging into that bridge maintenance contract. County records showed $180,000 annually going to Pine Ridge Community Infrastructure LLC for bridge upkeep. Want to guess who owned that LLC? I'll give you one hint. She rhymes with Victoria. For 15 years, this woman had been stealing my bridge maintenance money. $2.7 million plus interest, plus the satisfaction of knowing I could legally shut down her entire scam with one phone call. The rustle of legal documents became my lullaby as Sarah explained my nuclear options. "Ezra, this isn't just harassment anymore. We're looking at wire fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering." Victoria's panic showed when she called another emergency meeting, proposing a special assessment to buy out my problematic property for exactly $3,100. the amount of those permits she'd forced me to buy. Highway robbery with a gavel and a smile. The meeting was half empty. Victoria's reign of terror had people scared to show up. But Mrs. Holloway marched in like she was storming Normandy, followed by the Rodriguez family and Jake Morrison. "This harassment has to stop," Mrs. Holloway declared, standing with more backbone than people half her age. "Ezra Blackwood is a good man, and we all know it." Victoria's mask slipped. "Mrs. Holloway, perhaps you don't understand what's at stake." "I understand bullying perfectly," the old woman fired back. "Lived through it for 83 years. The taste of impending victory was sweeter than Margaret's apple pie as I watched Victoria's empire crack. But I stayed quiet, taking notes. Sometimes the best strategy is letting your enemies hang themselves with their own rope. After the meeting, Jake Morrison caught my arm in the parking lot. "Ezra, whatever you're planning, I'm in. We've all had enough," Mrs. Holloway nodded. "Time to remind Victoria who really runs this mountain." I shook their hands, thinking about that bridge and $2.7 million in stolen money. Victoria thought she was playing chess with a grieving old man. She had no idea she'd been playing with a demolitions expert. Victoria's next move proved she'd completely lost her mind. Instead of backing down after the disastrous community meeting, she doubled down like a Vegas gambler betting the mortgage on snake eyes. Monday morning, I woke up to the sound of construction. Not the gentle tap-tap of a neighbor fixing a fence, but the industrial clang of metal gates and electronic equipment being installed at our community entrance. By noon, Pine Ridge had its very own electronic gate system, complete with keypads, cameras, and a guard shack that looked like it belonged at Guantanamo Bay. Victoria stood beside it in her designer jacket, directing workers like Napoleon deploying cannons, if Napoleon had worn Louboutins and carried a clipboard. "Security upgrade," she announced to anyone who'd listen. "For everyone's protection." The kicker? My access code mysteriously expired that same afternoon. I returned from a supply run to find myself locked out of my own community. The gate's red light blinked at me like a robotic middle finger, and the intercom crackled with the voice of some rent-a-cop who'd clearly been briefed. "Sorry, sir. System error," he said, sounding about as sorry as a tax collector. "Gonna take several days to fix. Maybe call the HOA president." The metallic taste of pure rage filled my mouth as I sat in my truck, watching my neighbors drive past with codes that worked perfectly. This wasn't just harassment anymore. Victoria had turned my home into Alcatraz, and I was the only prisoner. Mrs. Holloway rolled down her window, looking like she wanted to storm the gate with a rolling pin. "Ezra, this is criminal. I'm calling that woman right now." "Don't worry," I said, photographing everything with my phone. She just handed me a felony case on a silver platter. While Victoria celebrated her electronic cage, I was speed-dialing Sarah Chen, who nearly spit out her coffee when I described the situation. "She locked you out?" "Ezra, that's unlawful restraint. She just upgraded from civil harassment to criminal charges faster than you can say stupid criminal." Deputy Martinez arrived within an hour, took one look at the gate blocking my driveway, and started shaking his head like he'd seen every flavor of human stupidity. "Ma'am," he told Victoria, "you can't imprison a property owner on his own land. That's false imprisonment, and it's a felony." Victoria's response was peak-entitled suburbanite. "Officer, I'm sure you don't understand the legal complexities of HOA governance and community safety protocols." "Lady, I understand handcuffs," Martinez cut her off. "Open the gate, now." But here's where I played my nuclear option. While Victoria argued with the deputy, Sarah was filing emergency injunctions and serving notice to the Colorado Department of Transportation about irregularities in bridge maintenance payments. CDOT doesn't mess around when highway funds go missing. Within 48 hours, forensic accountant Williams was dissecting Pine Ridge's finances like a coroner examining a suspicious death. What he found turned Victoria's petty crime spree into a federal case. Her family had been running Pine Ridge like the Corleone family ran Vegas, if the Corleones had worn cardigans and driven Lexus SUVs. Brother-in-law's surveying, $200,000 in phantom work. Son Bradley's landscaping, $150,000 in inflated contracts. Husband Marcus's legal fees, $89,000 for routine paperwork that should have cost $5,000. Combined with the bridge payments, Victoria had stolen over $3.5 million from her own neighbors. That night, the distinctive hum of industrial shredders could be heard from Victoria's house. Apparently, someone was having a midnight document barbecue. Too bad Williams had already downloaded everything from the county's digital archives. The community's reaction was like watching a dam burst. Jake Morrison organized an emergency meeting at Murphy's Diner, and 23 residents showed up with receipts, invoices, and stories that would make a prosecutor salivate. "She charged us $8,000 for emergency road repair," fumed the Garcias. Turned out to be her nephew throwing some gravel in a pothole. Mrs. Patterson's daughter drove up from Denver with a folder full of fraudulent bills. Mom paid $3,000 for community lighting upgrades, found the same solar lights at Walmart for $89. The rumble of angry voices filled the diner as resident after resident realized they'd been funding Victoria's lifestyle for years. The woman hadn't just been stealing money. She'd been stealing their trust, their peace, and their community. But Victoria wasn't going quietly into that good night. Her panic response was scheduling an emergency Friday meeting to demand the community purchase bridge rights from me for $50,000, roughly 1% of what she'd stolen. By Thursday, local reporter Kate Morrison was sniffing around with questions about financial irregularities in Mountain HOA. The Jefferson County Tribune was planning a front-page exposé, Queen of the Mountain, How One Woman Stole a Community's Soul. Friday evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, thinking about my grandfather's honest bridge and all the lies built on top of it. Tomorrow night, Victoria Thornfield was going to discover what happens when you corner a Blackwood on his own mountain. This was going to be fun. The bombshell that changed everything came Tuesday morning in a manila envelope thick enough to choke a horse. Sarah Chen had been busy with her forensic accountant, and what they'd uncovered made Victoria's gate stunt look like a parking violation. "Ezra," Sarah said over the phone, barely containing her excitement, "you need to sit down for this, and maybe pour yourself something stronger than coffee." The financial audit revealed Victoria hadn't just been stealing community funds. She'd been running a criminal enterprise that would make the Sopranos look like amateur pickpockets. The bridge maintenance scam was just the appetizer to a feast of fraud. The rustle of documents filled my kitchen as I spread Sarah's findings across my grandfather's old oak table. Every improvement project over 8 years had been inflated, falsified, or completely fictional. Snow removal contract? Victoria's cousin charged $40,000 annually for work worth $8,000. Emergency septic repairs? Brother-in-law's plumbing company billed $75,000 for replacing perfectly functioning systems. Even the community newsletter was a grift, $15,000 annually for Victoria's personal propaganda sheet. Marcus's law firm had been billing legal consultations that consisted mainly of teaching Victoria new ways to steal. Bradley's landscaping business existed solely to turn $20 worth of daisies into $500 invoices. The kid couldn't grow mold in a shower, but he could sure grow invoices. Total theft, $847,000 from community funds, plus $2.7 million in bridge payments. But here's where Sarah hit pay dirt that explained everything. Buried in 1962 property records, she'd discovered the real reason Victoria wanted me gone. My grandfather's original 40 acres had included Victoria's current lot. He'd lost it in a poker game to her late father-in-law, Theodore Thornfield Sr. Family legend said Grandpa suspected cheating but couldn't prove it. A busted straight against a suspiciously convenient full house. The bitter taste of 60-year-old betrayal filled my mouth as the pieces clicked together. Victoria had known about my bridge ownership from day one. Her entire harassment campaign wasn't about community standards. It was revenge for a poker game older than color television, wrapped in the biggest HOA theft in Colorado history. The criminal picture was stunning in its scope. Williams, the forensic accountant, called it organized crime in cardigans, a systematic looting operation disguised as community improvement. Forged invoices, phantom work orders, kickback agreements hidden in legitimate contracts. Victoria's desperation was showing in real time. Marcus had quietly filed for divorce 2 weeks ago, citing irreconcilable differences. Lawyers speak for, "My wife's a criminal and I'm heading for the hills before the handcuffs come out." Bradley had been frantically trying to withdraw money from his business accounts, only to discover the IRS had frozen everything pending audit. Apparently, paying taxes on stolen money hadn't occurred to the landscaping genius. The power dynamic had flipped completely. Victoria was no longer the predator stalking an isolated widower. She was a cornered embezzler facing federal charges, civil lawsuits, and the spectacular collapse of her stolen empire. The sound of gravel crunching in my driveway announced County Commissioner Walsh, looking like he'd rather wrestle bears than have this conversation. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, hat literally in hand. "We need to discuss Friday's meeting. There are some irregularities requiring immediate attention." Irregularities, like calling the Hindenburg a minor heating issue. "Commissioner," I said, offering coffee, "what we need to discuss is how Pine Ridge will elect a new HOA board and recover $3.5 million in stolen funds." His relief was visible from space. The county had been dodging Victoria's political connections for years. Now they had a victim willing to fight and evidence that would make prosecutors weep with joy. Friday night wasn't going to be about bridge ownership anymore. It was going to be Victoria Thornfield's very public, very permanent downfall. Margaret always said justice was patient. She never mentioned how satisfying it could be when it finally arrived. Wednesday morning transformed my grandfather's workshop into a war room that would make the Pentagon jealous. Sarah Chen arrived at dawn with 2 briefcases full of evidence and a smile sharp enough to perform surgery. "Ezra," she said, spreading documents across my workbench like a general planning D-Day, "Victoria Thornfield just handed us the legal equivalent of a royal flush. Time to go all in and watch her fold." My team was small, but deadlier than a nest of vipers. Sarah Chen, property rights attorney with a 20-year track record of destroying corrupt HOAs. Miguel Santos, forensic accountant and former FBI white-collar investigator who'd unraveled 3 Ponzi schemes and one spectacularly crooked casino. Rebecca Stone, civil rights lawyer working pro bono because she'd grown up watching small-town tyrants crush honest people. And my ace in the hole, retired Judge Hamilton Gray, my old Army buddy who knew every legal loophole in Colorado, and a few that weren't in the books yet. The aroma of fresh coffee and impending justice filled the workshop as we laid out our battle plan. Maps of property boundaries covered one wall. Financial flowcharts showing Victoria's elaborate money laundering covered another. Timeline charts documenting 8 years of systematic theft lined the third wall like a prosecutor's wet dream. "This isn't just about your bridge anymore," Rebecca said, pointing at the evidence with the enthusiasm of a kid unwrapping Christmas presents. "Victoria's created a textbook RICO case. We're talking federal racketeering charges." The financial strategy was beautiful in its devastating simplicity. I could legally close the bridge tomorrow, turning Pine Ridge into an expensive island. The structure needed $400,000 in deferred maintenance, work Victoria had been collecting money for while apparently using it to fund her Botox addiction instead. "Here's the gorgeous part," Miguel explained, his calculator clicking like a casino slot machine hitting jackpot. "She owes you $2.7 million in bridge payments, plus the community's $847,000 in embezzled funds, plus triple damages for fraud. We're talking north of $8 million in total liability." Meanwhile, Victoria was having what could charitably be called a complete meltdown. Sources at the county courthouse reported she'd shown up Tuesday demanding to speak to someone in charge about harassment by rogue attorneys. When told the investigation was legitimate, she'd reportedly screamed about corrupt government officials before storming out in her Lexus. The community organizing was pure poetry in motion. Mrs. Holloway had weaponized her Bridge Club network, spreading truth faster than Victoria had once spread lies. Every coffee morning, book club meeting, and grocery store encounter became a tactical briefing. "Honey," she told me Thursday morning, "these women have been suspicious for years. Victoria's designer wardrobe while we're paying emergency assessments? Her annual business trips to Europe? We're not stupid, we just needed someone with the backbone to fight." Jake Morrison had rallied every working-class resident who'd ever been on Victoria's target list. The informal alliance included contractors, handymen, teachers, and nurses, people who actually worked for their money instead of stealing it from neighbors. Maria Rodriguez brought evidence that would make prosecutors weep with joy. Photos of Victoria's professional landscaping that consisted of throwing wildflower seeds on dirt and charging $5,000 per yard. "She fined us for hanging laundry outside," Maria said, her nurse's composure cracking with righteous anger. "Called it unsightly. This from a woman stealing our money to fund plastic surgery and complaining about our clean clothes." The click of computer keyboards became our evening soundtrack as we compiled evidence into presentations so damning they should come with warning labels. Every fraudulent invoice, every inflated contract, every kickback payment was documented with precision that would impress an IRS auditor during tax season. The media strategy was chef's kiss perfect. Reporter Kate Morrison wasn't just covering local corruption anymore, she was documenting the biggest municipal fraud case in Colorado history. Denver TV stations were sending crews. A true crime podcast called Bridge to Nowhere was already in production. Victoria's political protection had evaporated faster than water in Death Valley. County Commissioner Walsh publicly announced a comprehensive investigation into governance irregularities. The state attorney general was asking pointed questions about oversight and accountability. The whir of my old printer working overtime became the soundtrack of approaching justice. We prepared 47 identical evidence packets, one for every household, containing Victoria's criminal greatest hits and calculations showing exactly how much each family had lost to her schemes. Bridge inspection reports confirmed what I'd suspected. The structure needed immediate repairs that Victoria had been collecting money for but never performing. Engineering analysis proved I could legally close it for safety reasons, effectively holding the entire community hostage until someone ponied up $400,000. Hamilton Gray provided the legal coup de grace. "You don't need to destroy Victoria," he said, reviewing our evidence with professional satisfaction. "She's already destroyed herself. We just need to document the spectacular explosion." By Thursday evening, everything was locked and loaded, evidence ready, media alerted, law enforcement briefed, Victoria isolated and panicking. Friday night was going to be more entertaining than Netflix and twice as satisfying. Time to show Victoria what happened when you picked a fight with the wrong mountain man. Victoria's descent into full-blown criminal desperation began Thursday morning when she hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my past. Unfortunately for her, she'd picked the wrong target for a smear campaign. The PI, a sleazy guy named Kruger who looked like he'd failed the police academy twice, spent exactly 3 days investigating Ezra Blackwood before having what could only be described as a crisis of conscience. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, appearing at my door Friday morning looking embarrassed enough to hide under a rock, "I need to return Mrs. Thornfield's money and give you some information. Turns out my military service record and engineering awards made me look like a Boy Scout compared to Victoria's criminal enterprise." But Kruger had discovered something even more damaging. Victoria's previous HOA conflicts in Denver, where she'd used identical tactics against 3 different communities before fleeing to Pine Ridge. "She's a serial HOA predator," Kruger explained, handing me a thick file. "Denver, Colorado Springs, Boulder, same pattern every time. Take over the board, install family members as contractors, steal everything that isn't nailed down, then disappear when the heat gets too intense." The rustle of damning evidence felt like Christmas morning as I flipped through photos of Victoria's previous victims and their remarkably similar stories. But Victoria wasn't done making catastrophically stupid decisions. Thursday afternoon, she approached County Inspector Williams with an envelope containing $5,000 in cash and a suggestion that my cabin might have structural issues requiring immediate condemnation. Williams, an honest civil servant with 30 years of experience and zero tolerance for corruption, immediately reported the bribery attempt to the district attorney's office. "Ma'am," he told Victoria, "I've seen some desperate people in my time, but trying to bribe a county official is a new level of stupid. Have a nice day and expect a visit from some folks with badges." Meanwhile, I was playing the longest chess game of my life. While Victoria panicked and committed felonies, I was quietly installing security cameras around the bridge approaches and contracting with Peterson Engineering for a routine safety inspection that would document every expensive repair Victoria had been avoiding. The bridge inspection results were damning: structural degradation that should have been addressed annually, drainage issues that could cause foundation problems, railing systems that violated current safety codes. Total repair cost: exactly the $400,000 Victoria had been stealing for maintenance. The mechanical whir of Peterson's equipment echoed across the valley as they documented 8 years of deferred maintenance that Victoria had been collecting money for while spending it on designer handbags. Sarah Chen arranged with the Colorado Department of Transportation for emergency access protocols, basically legal permission to close the bridge if safety concerns required it. CDOT was thrilled to cooperate, considering they'd been unknowingly funding Victoria's shopping sprees with highway maintenance money. Victoria's family was imploding spectacularly. Marcus had moved out Tuesday night, taking nothing but his law books and his dignity. Bradley was frantically trying to liquidate his fake landscaping business before the IRS seized everything. Even Victoria's sister Patricia, a Pine Ridge board member, resigned in a letter that basically said, "I can't be associated with this criminal anymore." The community intimidation campaign was Victoria's final desperate gambit. Anonymous threatening letters appeared in mailboxes of my supporters, warning about consequences for supporting troublemakers. Social media harassment targeted Maria Rodriguez and Jake Morrison with fake accounts posting personal information and veiled threats. The scratch of security camera installation in pre-dawn darkness became my new morning routine as I documented every act of harassment. Victoria was creating evidence against herself faster than a criminal justice textbook could catalog felonies. But her biggest mistake was underestimating Mrs. Holloway's tech-savvy college grandson, Tommy, who traced the anonymous harassment back to Victoria's home IP address in about 20 minutes. "Grandma," Tommy announced at Sunday dinner, "your HOA president is really bad at cybercrime." The digital forensics revealed Victoria had been using her home computer to create fake social media accounts, send threatening emails, and even post fake negative reviews of local businesses that supported me. She'd left an electronic trail that would make prosecutors dance with joy. Sheriff's deputies arrested Bradley Tuesday afternoon for vandalizing the Rodriguez family car, caught on 3 different security cameras spray painting "traitors" across their windshield. The kid pleaded guilty immediately, probably hoping cooperation would reduce his mother's inevitable sentence. The buzz of legal documents being served became Pine Ridge's new background noise as process servers delivered subpoenas to Victoria's remaining allies. Criminal charges were being filed faster than she could hire lawyers to defend against them. By Wednesday, Victoria was calling emergency meetings that nobody attended, sending emails that nobody answered, and making threats that nobody feared. Her reign of terror had collapsed into a one-woman pity party with an audience of 0. The final straw came when she attempted to call the FBI to report me for domestic terrorism and threatening critical infrastructure. The agent who took her call reportedly listened for 5 minutes before suggesting she might want to hire a really good criminal defense attorney. Thursday night, I sat on my porch watching Victoria's house where lights burned until dawn as she presumably shredded documents and packed bags. Tomorrow's community meeting was going to be the final act of her very public downfall. Margaret always said desperate people make desperate choices. She never mentioned how entertaining those choices could be to watch. Victoria's final week of freedom was a masterclass in how not to handle criminal exposure. Instead of quietly disappearing like a smart felon, she chose the scorched earth approach, apparently convinced that if she couldn't have Pine Ridge, nobody could. Monday morning brought her most delusional scheme yet, dissolving the entire HOA to avoid prosecution. She filed emergency paperwork with the county claiming irreconcilable governance disputes and community safety concerns required immediate dissolution of Pine Ridge Estates as a legal entity. Her logic was spectacular in its stupidity. If there was no HOA, there could be no embezzlement charges. Unfortunately for Victoria, dissolved organizations don't magically erase felony convictions, and missing money doesn't undisappear because you file paperwork. The acrid smell of desperation hung over Pine Ridge like smoke from a tire fire as Victoria made increasingly erratic public appearances. Tuesday afternoon, she was spotted at Murphy's Diner loudly demanding the owner stop serving people who are destroying our community. When Murphy pointed out that feeding people was literally his job, Victoria screamed about harassment by radical elements and stormed out without paying her check. The false police reports started Wednesday. Victoria called 911 claiming I was making terrorist threats against community infrastructure because I'd mentioned my bridge ownership at the grocery store. She reported suspicious activity at my workshop because I was building evidence charts. She even claimed I was trespassing on community property when I walked my own land. Sheriff Martinez, who'd been dealing with Victoria's hysteria for weeks, finally lost patience. "Ma'am, filing false reports is a crime. Continue this behavior and you'll be arrested for misusing emergency services." But Victoria's masterstroke of stupidity was attempting to sell her house for 40% below market value to escape before property values collapse completely. The fire sale attracted exactly 0 buyers once they researched the property's legal complications. "Would you buy a house?" Jake Morrison asked me with a grin, "where the only road out might be owned by someone the seller's been harassing for months?" The sound of moving trucks became Pine Ridge's background noise as Victoria frantically tried to liquidate assets before they could be seized. Unfortunately, the court had frozen her accounts pending the embezzlement investigation, leaving her watching movers repossess furniture she couldn't afford to keep. The media war escalated when Victoria contacted Channel 7 News with a sob story about being victimized by a dangerous neighbor with mental health issues. Reporter Jessica Walsh arrived expecting a human interest story and instead discovered the biggest municipal corruption case in Colorado history. Mrs. Thornfield, Walsh said during what Victoria thought would be a sympathetic interview, are you aware that federal investigators have identified you as the primary suspect in a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme? Victoria's on-camera meltdown went viral within hours. Her shrieking about fake news and government conspiracies while standing in front of her mansion, purchased with stolen HOA funds, became the poster child for entitled criminal delusion. The community revolt reached critical mass Thursday when Victoria showed up uninvited at my property demanding immediate negotiations to resolve this misunderstanding. She'd apparently convinced herself that charm and entitlement could fix federal criminal charges. Ezra, she said, standing on my porch in a designer outfit that cost more than most people's cars, surely we can work something out between reasonable people. Victoria, I replied, camera rolling to document everything. Reasonable people don't steal $3.5 million from their neighbors. Her mask finally slipped completely. You have no idea what you've done, she screamed. I'll burn this whole place down before I let you destroy everything I've built. The crack in her voice revealed someone finally understanding that consequences were real and unavoidable. Mrs. Holloway, who'd been walking by with her daily constitutional, stopped to witness Victoria's complete psychological breakdown. Honey, the old woman said with devastating gentleness, what you built was made of lies and stolen money. It was always going to fall down. Victoria's response was to threaten legal action against everyone involved in this conspiracy. When I pointed out that her husband had filed for divorce and her son was facing criminal charges, she began screaming about corrupt judges and rigged systems. The final confrontation was scheduled for Friday night's emergency meeting, Victoria's last chance to control the narrative before criminal charges were filed. She'd sent emails to every resident promising shocking revelations about dangerous elements threatening our community. What she didn't know was that 43 of 47 households had already received our evidence packets. The shocking revelations were going to be about her, not me. The taste of inevitable victory was sweeter than anything I'd experienced since Margaret's apple pie. Tomorrow night, Victoria Thornfield would face a room full of people she'd been robbing for years, armed with proof of every crime she'd committed. Friday evening, I sat on my porch watching lights burn late in Victoria's windows as she presumably practiced whatever lies she planned to tell. The mountain was silent except for wind through the pines and the distant sound of justice approaching like thunder. Margaret used to say that truth always finds a way. She never mentioned how satisfying it would be to watch it arrive. Friday night, the Pine Ridge Community Center looked like a cross between a town hall meeting and a public execution. 200 people packed into a space designed for 50, with regional TV crews setting up cameras and sheriff's deputies positioned strategically around the room. Victoria arrived fashionably late in her Lexus, apparently still believing she could control the narrative. She wore her most expensive outfit, a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most residents' monthly mortgage payments, and carried herself with the delusional confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. The buzz of anticipation filled the room as she strode to the podium like she was accepting an award instead of facing a firing squad of angry neighbors armed with evidence of her crimes. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria began, her voice projecting the artificial authority she'd wielded for years. I've called this emergency meeting to address the malicious attacks against your elected leadership and the dangerous elements threatening our community's safety. The crowd's reaction was immediate and hostile. Shouts of, "Where's our money?" and "Thief!" erupted from the audience. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, holding her evidence packet like a weapon. Victoria, we know about the fake landscaping bills. We know about the bridge money. We know about everything. Victoria's composure cracked slightly, but she pressed on with her prepared lies. These accusations are the desperate attempts of a disturbed individual who... That's enough. My voice cut through her babbling like a knife through butter. The room fell silent as I stood up, holding a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. The click of my boots on the wooden floor echoed as I walked to the front of the room. Behind me, Sarah Chen wheeled in a cart loaded with evidence boxes. Miguel Santos set up a laptop connected to the overhead projector. The cavalry had arrived. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, turning to face the crowd, let me tell you about a bridge. I opened the folder and pulled out my grandfather's 1943 mining claim documents, holding them up for everyone to see. This is the deed that proves my family has owned the bridge connecting Pine Ridge to the outside world for 81 years. Gasps rippled through the audience. Victoria's face went from confident to confused to horrified in the span of 3 seconds. For the past 15 years, I continued, the Colorado Department of Transportation has been paying bridge maintenance fees to Pine Ridge Community Infrastructure LLC. That's Victoria's shell company. She's been stealing money that legally belongs to me, $2.7 million. The projector screen lit up with financial documents showing every fraudulent payment. The crowd's murmur turned into an angry roar as they saw the scope of Victoria's theft. But that's not all, I said, enjoying every second of Victoria's growing panic. Mrs. Thornfield has been running a criminal enterprise disguised as community improvement. Every project, every contract, every special assessment, all of it designed to funnel your money into her family's pockets. Miguel stepped forward with a laser pointer, highlighting the financial flowcharts showing Victoria's embezzlement network. Total theft from community funds, $847,000 over 8 years. Brother-in-law's surveying company, son's landscaping business, husband's legal fees, all inflated by hundreds of %. Victoria tried to interrupt. These are fabricated documents. This is a conspiracy to... Ma'am, Sheriff Martinez said, stepping forward with handcuffs gleaming under the fluorescent lights. You have the right to remain silent. I'd suggest using it. The room erupted in applause as Martinez read Victoria her rights. Criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, bribery, filing false police reports, and racketeering. Federal prosecutors were preparing additional charges related to interstate wire fraud and money laundering. The metallic click of handcuffs closing around Victoria's wrists was the sweetest sound I'd heard since Margaret's laughter. The woman who'd tried to destroy my life was finally facing justice for her crimes. "You can't do this," Victoria screamed as deputies led her toward the door. "I'll fight this. I'll appeal. Victoria," I called out, stopping her mid-rant. "You might want to save your energy. You're going to need a really good lawyer." The crowd's laughter followed her out the door and into the patrol car, where camera flashes documented the end of her reign of terror. County Commissioner Walsh took the podium to announce the immediate dissolution of Victoria's HOA board and the appointment of an interim governance committee. Criminal prosecutors would work with federal investigators to recover stolen funds and return them to the community. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, turning to me, "what are your intentions regarding bridge access?" I stood up, looking at the faces of neighbors who'd suffered under Victoria's tyranny for years. "The bridge will remain open, but Pine Ridge is going to purchase proper ownership for fair market value, $50,000. That money will go directly into a community scholarship fund." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Mrs. Holloway wiped tears from her eyes. Jake Morrison pumped his fist in the air. Maria Rodriguez hugged her children, finally free from Victoria's harassment. The flash of camera bulbs documented the moment Pine Ridge reclaimed its soul from a thief who'd nearly destroyed it. Outside, Victoria's patrol car disappeared into the mountain darkness, carrying away 8 years of corruption and fear. Justice had finally come to Pine Ridge, and it had arrived in handcuffs. 1 month later, Victoria Thornfield stood in Jefferson County Court wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed spectacularly with her designer sensibilities. She pleaded guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and bribery charges rather than face a trial that would have lasted months and embarrassed her even more publicly. Judge Hamilton Gray, my old Army buddy, now presiding over Victoria's sentencing, showed no mercy for HOA tyrants who robbed their neighbors. 3 years in state prison, $3.5 million in restitution, and 500 hours of community service cleaning highways. Marcus had already fled to Denver with his tail between his legs, while Bradley was working minimum wage at a gas station, apparently learning what honest work looked like for the first time in his privileged life. The sound of children's laughter now filled the space where Victoria's mansion once stood. The community had purchased the foreclosed property and converted it into Pine Ridge's first public park, complete with playgrounds, picnic areas, and a memorial garden honoring honest governance and neighbor cooperation. The bridge renovation became Pine Ridge's greatest community project. Residents volunteered weekends to help with everything from concrete work to painting railings. Jake Morrison coordinated the construction, Mrs. Holloway organized meal delivery for volunteers, and Maria Rodriguez's nursing skills came in handy for inevitable construction injuries. The new HOA board, elected in a landslide vote for transparency, implemented revolutionary concepts like competitive bidding, public financial records, and monthly meetings with actual citizen participation. The difference was stunning. Community projects that Victoria had priced at $50,000 were being completed for $8,000 by honest contractors grateful for legitimate work. property values increased 15% within 6 months as word spread about Pine Ridge's transformation from corruption to cooperation. New residents were specifically attracted to the community's commitment to democratic governance and financial transparency. The waiting list for homes grew longer than a grocery store line during a blizzard. My personal transformation surprised everyone, especially me. Grief-induced isolation had given way to reluctant leadership as residents kept asking for advice on everything from contractor disputes to municipal politics. The workshop became an informal community center where neighbors gathered to solve problems the old-fashioned way, by talking to each other like human beings. The scent of fresh coffee and friendship replaced the bitter taste of conflict as Pine Ridge healed from Victoria's reign of terror, Mrs. Holloway's widowed sister Sarah and I had been spending considerable time together, sharing stories about loss, resilience, and second chances that life sometimes offers when you least expect them. The ripple effects spread far beyond our mountain community. Bridgegate became a case study in property rights law schools across the country. The Colorado legislature passed the Pine Ridge Act, requiring HOA financial audits and criminal background checks for board members. Other communities facing similar corruption began calling for advice on fighting back against petty dictators. Documentary filmmaker Rebecca Martinez optioned our story for an independent film titled The Bridge to Justice. The advance money went directly into Pine Ridge's scholarship fund, which had already sent 3 local kids to college with full rides. Victoria's theft had inadvertently funded the next generation's education. Local businesses thrived without Victoria's intimidation and kickback schemes. Murphy's Diner became the unofficial community center, hosting monthly democracy dinners where residents discussed local issues over home-cooked meals. The economic boost was remarkable. Turns out honest governance was good for business. Justice served came with a side of sweet irony. Victoria was released after 18 months for good behavior, forced to live in a studio apartment and work retail, while banned from serving on any board or nonprofit organization. She'd become a cautionary tale about unchecked power and greed, exactly what she deserved. The crisp mountain air carried the sounds of a healthy community as I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the peaks gold. My phone rang with another call from a desperate homeowner in Arizona facing similar HOA corruption, water rights this time, instead of bridge ownership. Mrs. Holloway, now serving as Pine Ridge's democratically elected president, stopped by with fresh apple pie and encouragement. "Ezra, that Arizona community needs you. We've got things handled here." I looked at the bridge spanning the valley, now properly maintained and honestly governed, connecting homes where neighbors actually talk to each other instead of scheming against each other. "What do you think, Margaret?" I whispered to the mountain wind. The answer came in the form of children playing in Victoria's former garden, their laughter echoing across water flowing freely under an honest bridge. Time to help another community learn that sometimes the little guy wins, but only when they fight smart instead of fighting angry. Share your HOA nightmare story below. Your experience might help someone else fight back. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people standing up to corrupt authority. Because sometimes justice wears work boots and carries surveying equipment.